Welcome back to TAC Ops. I'm here with Eric.
Howdy, howdy.
Hey, Eric. Today we have H.I. Sutton. It'll be the first. I know Eric's really excited about this. The first of
man.
3 episodes in a row with submarine experts. Submarine content.
Yeah. So we're doing like a 3-part triple header feature of submarine, just great submarine content creators, just of all ages now, I guess, at this point when it comes to submarine content. Because today we got Sutton on again for the 3rd to 4th time, I guess, if we can find the lost episode. It's gonna happen. I'm telling you, we're gonna find that lost episode, and then we're gonna have on Larry Bond next Saturday, author of
Sunday.
Sorry, it's Sunday. Yeah, sorry. July 5th. Yeah, July 4th. SARS. July 5th, we're gonna have on Larry Bond. He'll be on. He's author of Red Storm Rising. He created the whole Harpoon series. He's working on Harpoon 4 right now, so another new Harpoon. Yeah. And then the week after that, we're gonna have W. Craig Reed, who is the author of Red November and is writing a new book called Spies of the Deep, which is, I've only gotten through a few pages of it because I've only had it for a few days, but it's pretty damn good. It's a long book too, so I don't know if I'm gonna make it all the way through before we
got a lot of books to read. You have to finish Red Storm Rising.
Yeah, I got a 650-page book I got to read in a week. Yeah, man, I don't know if I'm ever gonna get through all this stuff, but.
And you have our guest today, H.I. Sutton's book here too, right?
Yeah, definitely. So we got the World Submarines Recognition Guide and then the Narco Submarines Recognition Guide, both kind of along the same lines. One's for submarines, one's Narco Subs. So you definitely got to check out both of those. But we have Sutton here, man. Thanks for being on our show. I really appreciate it. Oh, sorry. I guess we got to talk about our sponsor first. Hold on, don't go anywhere yet. We got to get paid first.
The Commando Store. It's an online military surplus store. Eric, go through here.
Yeah.
So they have the boots and stuff, and I'm surprised. I mean, a lot of people love these boots. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not a boot guy. I've had people message me and say, "Oh, I got my boots today. They're awesome." People love them.
Yeah, they got these black boots, and then they got these nice tan. I don't know how to
naval
pronounce
board boots.
Bunsweir tropical naval board boots.
Yeah.
Tropical naval board boots. That's pretty sweet. I guess I would never think about wearing boots like this in a tropical setting. But hey, I mean, if you're trying to storm a beach, you got to do what you got to do, right?
And then
comes with like a shoe care kit and all kinds.
Well, it
of
doesn't
stuff.
come with it.
But you got to get that extra stuff. But this is the great one we were talking about.
This is kind of funny.
So the tanks have rolled in. So you can buy a Soviet summer tanker helmet. It's got the electrical connection. So I don't know how real this is. We've gone through this a little bit, and it doesn't say if it's completely realistic or not.
I would assume it's legitimate.
It looks
real. Look, it even has acrylic writing on it. Yeah.
I mean, it looks definitely real. I don't think it's used. I think it's actually like surplus, Russian surplus.
But either way, they always have strange, interesting, unique things on here. All the time. Like every time we do the podcast, we look at it, we find something different.
Yeah. They still got food in packages, so you guys won't die out there from the COVID. So. Other than that, I think we're good. What's the sponsor?
Commando Store. Yeah. TAC Ops. Coupon code. TACOPS. No space in between it. Commando Store. Commando is spelled with a K. Store.com. And go check them out. Otherwise, Sutton, thanks for coming on again.
No, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
So this is gonna be, like I said, a big series about submarines. So we wanted to have you on. We're gonna have two just kind of like book authors on, but I wanted to have somebody who's just a great researcher, and I think you're probably the best at this point, in my opinion, that does the best submarine research out there.
Oh yeah.
And so I wanted to highlight a lot of the stuff you've been doing over the past. How long has it been since we've had you on? 6 months. Months. It's been months.
Oh, since the last time.
Yeah. It's been a while, so there's been a lot of really cool stuff going on, and we just want to kind of pick through all that stuff. But how you been, my friend?
Yeah, doing good, keeping busy.
Any good projects you're working on right now that you want to talk about real quick before we start diving in?
I'll give you a list. So if people probably realize I'm easiest to find me on Forbes. We've got upcoming articles on Poseidon, the torpedo, and Russian stuff. Lots on Russian stuff, I think. And then, I'm really interested. As North Korea has probably got a mini sub, 38 North. I've been doing some good research there, and I think it is a mini sub, a new one. So figuring out how that fits in. And tomorrow, well, hope fingers crossed, very soon on Naval News. That's another good website, so navalnews.com. Something around the dolphins or seals, the marine mammals that Russia deployed to Syria. So some new stuff on that.
Yeah, definitely, and that's where we kind of wanted to start going through your website, which is just the first one on there, the newest thing that you have, and it's a great one because I think that when you use animals used for military purposes has always been just really odd to me, but it's part of the game, right? You got to use all the assets and all the resources around you, right? And dolphins and smart mammals are generally pretty good at pulling off simple tasks, like you don't have canine dogs, you got bomb sniffing dolphins, you got diver sniffing dolphins that'll rip the mask out of your face or whatever, right? And so they're actually in Syria, right? So maybe you could talk a little bit about the marine mammal thing going on in Syria.
Yeah, so it was a chance discovery. I was looking at some commercial satellite imagery of Tartus in Syria, which is the main Russian and Syrian Navy base there. And it's where Russia deploys its submarines to and warships and gets most of its supplies, military supplies that are going into the war in Syria. And right there on Google Earth from 2018, you can see a couple of little pens in the water. And they're probably, I guess, I don't know how many people have looked at this on Google Earth, and probably quite a few. But to me, that's instantly recognizable what they are, because I've been looking at the same thing, particularly in the Arctic, actually. But it's marine mammal pens. So it's unmistakable. That's what they are. And they were there for several months. They're not there now, or at least not in that location.
Yeah, they seem to be pretty movable, right? That's what I've experienced. You can move them pretty easy. They almost look like floatable booms or something.
Well, they are. There's a sort of a cage underneath them, but you're right. The top is floating, and it's a holding pen, if you like, with seawater running through it.
Right, definitely. And so where are these dolphins trained at normally?
Well, they almost certainly come from the Black Sea, and
okay.
I suspect that they are seals rather than dolphins because of the size of the pens, but they could be dolphins. The Russian Navy trains both, and beluga whales as well, but they wouldn't be that. Those are bigger and more in the north, more colder water. But almost certainly from the Black Sea, near Sevastopol, there's a dolphin and probably seal unit of the Russian Navy.
I'm looking through on Google Earth right now, and yeah, that image is from November 2018, and then later on, it's gone. Do you think they're moving them around, or just get rid of them completely?
I suspect that they were only there for a while. That's the logical place to put them, in the sense that it's where the harbor protection units were. It is also it's a bit inconvenient maybe because there's you can park a big ship there. The berth is useful for cargo ships and things, but really, I can't see them anywhere else there, and so maybe they have moved them, and maybe it's just a question of finding them. But I looked. Google Earth gives you really good quality image, and go to Google Earth. But I also use other sources, commercial ones, and also something called Sentinel Hub, which is really low resolution, but it's really good. I mean, it's almost daily.
Yeah.
Depends where you are in more time. And it's very low resolution, but if you know what you're looking for, it can be very powerful. And with that, I've narrowed down the band, when they were there.
Nice. And that's a challenge to look through that low resolution stuff and try to identify, especially something that small. You might get one pixel making that up, right?
Exactly. You can pick up submarines and things. It's interesting. Aircraft carriers is the classic. They're easy. They're big enough, right? But with only Sentinel Hub, you'd never have spotted it. But when you know what you're looking where, and then you can sort of make some pretty safe bets that this little white pixel is because there's something like that there.
and then you can kind of get an idea of an area of interest, and then go to one of the commercial sites and decide if you want to spend your money to see a more recent image. Nice. Yeah, because that northern part, that northern pier, that farthest northern pier in, how do you say it, Taurus?
I say Tartus, but I'm not sure how the locals would say it.
Yeah, I know that's the Russian naval part. So the other ones are just commercial for Syria. That was
interesting. Yeah, there's the Syrian Navy, which still exists. There isn't much of it, but it still exists. Is there, and then the Russian Navy. But actually, where this is, where they placed it, is technically, at least by the maps, is technically Syrian Navy place. But clearly, it is Russian, and it's parked next to Russian boats. So I don't think, I'm not suggesting it's Syrian Navy, but it's it's ambiguous. That northern pier is definitely the military, naval ships and submarines and stuff. And I reckon Russia can park wherever they want there.
Yeah.
So with the dolphins, you think they're using them as like a harbor defense against divers coming in and sabotaging the boats, or what's your idea with the dolphins?
Yeah, so there's a few scenarios. So I would guess they're seals again, but it makes no difference. Yeah, other than that detail, the same applies. The most likely, if you were making bets, the number one bet is counter diver ops, and we know for a fact that the Russian Navy train or say that they train SEALs to do that, and describe how they would do it, and those base them there. They can then load them into a boat and take them to where they need them, but they could operate right there in the harbor or further out, and they could take them on a boat and to anywhere they wanted them to. They literally load them into like a rib or something and drive them to where they want to release them, because the animals can't swim as far as you might, they're not going to keep up with a motorboat.
Yeah.
But so that's number one option, is that they use them to identify and target divers, sabotage. So they call it anti-sabotage. Another possibility is that they'd use it for inspecting things like undersea pipelines. Now, there's some oil pipelines in the area that have been targeted by divers. I would probably rebel divers, maybe another government, I don't know, but certainly have been targeted and have been blown up with improvised explosives placed on the underwater, placed on the pipe. So they might have been using them to inspect and detect, mines or like limpet mines on pipes. That's another, or cables. So that's possible as well. It might, it was only there a while, so maybe it had an element of training or testing. Like deploy them for a while and see how it works and stuff like that. We'll see. Maybe it wasn't successful. Who knows? But it wasn't declared, and I didn't find any. So there we've got clear evidence of it, and the world didn't know.
One of the things I've been curious about lately is that when I was on my sub, we were always worried about divers because once you've been underwater, you kind of get it. Like you understand that nobody's going to really see you. Even if you're just 10 or 20 feet underwater, nobody's going to see you, right? So, that was always one of my big worries, was if a diver came in and attached a limpet mine to the side of the boat and, we didn't have booms up or whatever it was, and nobody saw the guy, that's going to be rough, man. And we had carriers there. We had all kinds of, assets in that Norfolk pier, because I was in Norfolk at the time. And, the submarines can the big fabled thing is they can go active. But it still takes a minute to fire up sonar. You can't just go over there and push a button and just ping it in the middle of of everybody doing maintenance and stuff, right? And if there's
divers,
have to
know they're there too,
right? And if there's already divers in the water, everybody's got their sonar secured, so you don't kill or hurt the divers that are already in the water doing cleanup or whatever, right? So, the divers were always big. What I've been more worried about recently is drones, because with the drone, they sound a lot different. They can be a lot bigger. They can be smaller. They vary widely, and you can always drive a drone. You can drive a drone however far you have the battery power for. You could drop it off in the middle of the Pacific and drive it into San Diego Bay if you really wanted to, as long as you had the battery power, right? And you could drive it right up under the submarine piers and nobody would ever know about it, right? So that's what my worry was, but nobody's going to find out about that. There's no, I mean, you can't put up nets to stop all that because what if the nets aren't big enough? Like, there's always these like things with drones, and I always feel like, I think they're trying to train them to pick off surveillance drones too.
Yeah. So like underwater drones. Yeah, I don't think dolphins and seals would be good for that. And same with SDV, so swimmer delivery vehicles, so sort of mini subs. They're far too much like sharks, basically. I've been told by someone who used to. So there's a guy out there, an author. So another person for people to look out for is a guy called Michael Wood. He is a Vietnam era SEAL who and UDT, so underwater demolition guy, and SDV expert, so swimmer delivery vehicle expert, who also worked, one of his things was working with, I think it was sea lions, but, and he's got familiarity, first-hand experience of dolphins and stuff and that. And, the impression I got from him, I mean, really sensible guy, is that, that probably dolphins weren't much use against swimmer delivery vehicles. They scare them. Yeah, that's all. Now, whether you can train one to overcome that and how, but yeah, it's those drones and things. So underwater drones, I think they're a really big hot topic from a defense perspective. And you do get stuff around having mini torpedoes on SDVs and things to try to tackle them, but they've also got challenges. I don't think they're an easy answer. Torpedoes are becoming more and more like drones. They're getting longer ranges and better autonomy, and AI will help them make some decisions and things. And you could really use those to attack a pool. I don't think I'd defend it with marine mammals, but I don't know how you would defend it.
Well, and one of the things I always thought they kind of used them for was more of a detection than an offensive weapon. More off, like they're not going to punch a diver in the face, but they can come up and say, hey, there's something down here, you guys need to come check this shit out, because we had that recent dolphin, I guess, dove down and found I can't remember now, it was an airplane or an old mine or something in the middle of the river.
A vintage torpedo. Beautiful.
Yeah, it was one of the Howell torpedoes, one of the original 1900s torpedoes. He was just swimming through and found it. Yeah. I'll have to find it on here. I'll show you guys. But yeah, just surveillance, really. And SDVs, anything you find, you can be like, hey, there's something down here. You guys need to come check out.
Oh. Yeah, let's say. I mean, a diver definitely. Diver they can put. I mean, there's no diver on the planet who can outswim any of these marine mammals. Obviously, and so they can attach something to you. So they're good for that.
Right. So is there any news or any evidence or anything you've seen that there is stuff going on there that Russia or Syria need to be looking out for? Like, is there any telltale signs or anything you've seen of drones going in there or dive or Navy or Navy SEALs, not actual SEALs?
No. Yes and no. I mean, it's very plausible. I mean, they've got a lot of reason to be concerned, and they take a lot of. If you remember, in the 80s, when Eastern Bloc, not just Russian but also Cuban and East German were quite active in Angola, and the South Africans used to attach limpet mines to them, that's very interesting. And actually was able to at least correspond and read up on the South African guys, and they actually had people dropping grenades on them, and it's certainly not nice. But it didn't kill them. So there's if people go to my website, and there's marine mammal pens, images from Google Earth. Next to it, there are two anti-sabotage boats. These are. Russia has a whole class of boats dedicated to attacking divers. That's how seriously they take it. And even on their submarines, the guys on the board of submarines, they don't just have rifles; they also have anti-diver grenade launchers. And the frigates have pedestal-mounted anti-diver grenade launchers with 10 barrels.
What kind of weapons are these anti sabotage boats armed with? Like what or sensors and all that?
Grenades.
Grenades.
Mainly grenades, but purpose-built ones that are designed, because you can just drop a grenade in the water and it'll bang. Yeah. But these ones are, around the depth and range and all that sort of thing. They're designed for that purpose, and they probably would kill you. Obviously, depending on how close they are, because the shock waves that go through the water can mess up your lungs, apparently.
Oh yeah.
So, and then I don't know if they do it, but traditionally, you can also do some pretty nasty things. People, just going around your pool with a fishing net with shark hooks on it is pretty real. People did that. I guess they still do. That would work if it catches you. Because I researched instances where it's happened. In Indonesian conflicts, so in the 60s, the British and Australians were suspecting the Indonesian government of doing stuff like that. One or two cases, and then and they think they caught one. Rather, they think they killed one. The body was never found. It goes right back to World War II, right? And the Italians were the masters of it. And then only once were they intercepted a British guy used his diving knife, to try to get an Italian guy, and he injured his leg. But the Italian guy didn't actually know what the cause were. He just thought he'd been, caught itself or something. He didn't know it was that. That's a bit of, it's real. They take it very seriously. So getting back on topic, there's nothing specific about attacking the port, but the terrorist organizations and the irregular forces in those areas do have diver capabilities and would try it. So they're right to be, from their perspective, they're right to be under defense.
Interesting. Sorry, I'm just looking through some of these pictures. Just looking through some of the different pictures here. Those underwater guns are pretty cool too. The APS-5 underwater assault rifle and the SPP-1.
Mm-hmm.
Are they designed a certain way then to be able to work better underwater?
Yes. Yeah. They're quite old, but they're still used a lot by some westernized forces as well. Actually, they can work. They mostly work underwater, and they can work above water. They have to. Everyone's seen the MythBuster thing around guns not working underwater, and there's some truth to it. But they make them work by firing essentially needles, and they have their bolt cycle is different, so they don't break themselves with the water in the bolt when they fire. Because you imagine the bolts coming back. Anyone's got a gun, is familiar with weapons. I guess a lot of people in America are. Would think if you're underwater and the bolt comes back and it can't compress the water, it's going to just break the gun, right? But they've solved that. But a lot of countries build it. Western special forces have never taken it seriously, and there's also someone explained to me that in the West these weapons are always so novel that once the novelty of firing them wears off, the administration of having to carry the damn thing and sign it out, and it's not a personal weapon, it's a special bit of kit, and the maintenance and everything makes it pretty uncool, and it's bulky and uncomfortable. But Russian forces have always emphasized these, and there's still now people developing new ones. There's a Norwegian company that has really working on making normal rifle weapons and firing into water. That's really interesting. I want to do an article on that one day. I definitely will. And in Russia, they continue to develop these. They've got elaborate versions. Or even put them on drones. There's even a small underwater drone armed with one of these that's been proposed in Russia to do underhull inspections. If you find someone that shoots them.
Is it accurate? It seems like with underwater drones and stuff, you'd have a delay and all that. It would be quick enough to be able to actually hit somebody with that.
Well, they'd have to work on AI, I would suggest. They'd have to make their own decision. And it's a small drone, you'd use it in the harbour or around a bridge or whatever, around, in proximity to where it's being based. And if firing at short ranges, I'm not overly convinced it would be that useful, but it's an interesting line of development for sure.
Yeah. Oh, we have someone who commented here. You want to read that one, Eric?
Yeah, so we have a commenter that said they lived in Crimea and they have naval dolphins there trained to protect port areas from sabotage divers. So yeah, and placing mines on ships. Boom.
Yeah, exactly. That where they base them, that's exactly where I think these animals in Tartus came from.
Right, definitely.
And I think it might be seals rather than dolphins, but but I'm not certain. I'm just guessing based on the size of the pen.
Nice. Okay, so you want to keep talking about dolphins and
what else we got?
Mammals. So the next one I wanted to talk about too. Oh, if you guys didn't check out the beluga whale, yeah, that's the other one, right? That was kind of the big story back in the day. It's a good story, so I'm not gonna just spoil it for you. Go through his website and check it out. It's a good one. The next big one I wanted to talk to you about was the kilo that transited the Bosphorus. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. And I think your mic's getting a little low. If you don't mind turning that back up a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, now it sounds a lot better.
Better?
Oh, yeah, perfect. Oh, now you're on.
No. Yes. So, so basically, the other day, a Kilo class submarine, so a Russian diesel electric submarine, passed through Turkey, the Bosphorus, which is sort of a narrow strait which connects the Black Sea to the Mediterranean. It's the only way of connecting those two seas. And so it passed from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, and it's probably going to do, essentially combat patrols in the Mediterranean. And but that's controversial because there's a very old, almost 100-year-old, 90-odd years, agreement called the Montreux Convention, which is one of those things. So we've all, after World War One, there were a lot of these sort of treaties and conventions, and some of them took longer than others to sort out. But this one relates to the Ottoman Empire or the Turkey as what is now the Republic of Turkey, and it was trying. I think its main aim really was to stop an arms race and secure and make sure that Turkey didn't have to become majorly armed, and it basically limits certain types of warship going through that water, so that basically whatever naval power you have in the Black Sea is not fungible, can't just be moved backwards and forwards into the Mediterranean, and also to an extent so you can't do a coup on Turkey and just put your whole fleet in the middle of Turkey by surprise.
Right.
So they limit. So there's a few. So that's the spirit of it, is to stop people who have navies in the Black Sea from also having the same, using the same navy in the Mediterranean, vice versa. They limit the tonnage of vessels going through, which is a bit less relevant now as vessels are a little bit smaller maybe, but they do limit the vessels and stuff. But they also stop aircraft carriers going through,
right?
And they stop submarines going through.
I didn't know the submarine part. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, they basically banned submarines other than Turkish ones, which go through all the time. That's different. But they banned submarines from going through. Now there's a clause. There's two scenarios where they allow submarines to go through. One is if it's being delivered. So if it's on a delivery voyage, so it can go through once to be delivered. And the second one is if it needs to go out to be repaired and go back. So to go to a dockyard that's outside. Now, the spirit is that you shouldn't be sending submarines through there, and these are exceptions. And Russia has sent submarines through there under these exceptions in the past during the Cold War, occasionally. Not very frequently, though. Not frequently at all. Now, more recently, they've had the war in Syria, and this law stops them from just moving their submarines back and forwards, but they want to, clearly. And so they've used both scenarios to actually game it, essentially. That would be a layman's terms. Now, they're going to refute this. They do. They're going to say that they're within the word of the law. Whether they're in the spirit of the law, I think, is open to debate. So essentially, to deploy a submarine to the Mediterranean from the Black Sea, they say that it's going for repair, and it probably will. But it doesn't just go for repair; it goes to do a war patrol on the way of going for repair. And then vice versa, when it comes back, they keep it in the Mediterranean for as long as possible, and then they come back and it's being delivered. But it's already done a war patrol. In some cases, already fired missiles, into Syria. So they are within the word of the, they're using the clause. And people who follow me on Twitter will probably be. So I did an article. So before the submarine came through. I think there were a number of people who had awareness of this and were watching the submarine come through. So within seconds of it coming through, I had an article up with pictures, thanks to the ship spotters in the Bosphorus who are brilliant, who take fantastic photos. And so I had photos, showing. And subsequent to that, the Russian Navy did a press release saying that it was for repair, even though the media had previously said it was going to go for a patrol, sort of a military deployment. And a lot of people are very quick to point out the flaws around, the delivery and the repair. But I think if, in a sense, if the big picture is that submarines are not meant to be moved that way, and then there's a clause, obsessing over the clause is sort of more or less giving Russia the okay to just casually do it and send submarines as often as they want. So I guess the frequency will increase, and they might even, one possibility, I think in the past they haven't deployed nuclear submarines to the Black Sea because this is too restrictive and they're too precious. So you only get diesel electric submarines there. In the future, if they're really confident that they can just go backwards and forwards whenever they want and say, hey, we're going to get repaired. A lot of things could change. The balance could change. But I think now Russia actually wants the law to be in place because it stops other people. So if you're the only one who can, who's bold enough to stretch it, then you've got an advantage.
Right. So that's kind of the deal, right? Because they're in Sevastopol now, and they're kind of back in claim of the Black Sea, so they want to limit what goes on, right? I guess that's kind of the idea.
They don't want to get submarine in the Black Sea.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things we talked about last time, I kind of want to cover again, is so what do you think your classification of a submarine is? So let's say I'm the United States and I want to send a drone into the Black Sea through the strait. It's not a submarine though. There's no people on it. Whatever your classification of what a submarine is. Remember, there's like 17 different definitions of it. Like what do you think about like sending more than just submarines through the strait?
Yeah, there's the ones that were tested, something like the Sea Lion that US Navy SEALs use, so semi-submersible stealth boat. Or they're now called combat craft heavy, I think it's the technical term. Yeah, that's a semi-submersible. Does that count? Probably not. A UUV, if it's a tiny one, probably not. If it's on a ship and it's a tiny one, it's towed, like an ROV, so a remote operated vehicle or a very small one, probably not. And in fact, Russia does send ships with ROVs on through the Bosphorus, and even people like me have not even raised an eyebrow. That's fine, I think. If they sent through something like the Orca, like the Boeing, an XL UUV, so an extra large uncrewed underwater vehicle, then I think there's definitely a question mark, especially if they sent it through in the water. But the thing is with drones is they don't need to go via the Bosphorus. They could just fly them over, or even a really big one. They're going to get small enough that they can take them other ways. The problem with a full-size submarine is it's pretty hard to go around the Bosphorus.
Yeah, because you have to go through. You have to go through on the surface. If you go back through our past podcast, I pulled up the depth through it, and you can't go through it submerged. There's no way. Even with a kilo or a small diesel, there's no way. There's just way too much traffic. Too much traffic.
It'd be very dangerous, and I mean, there's things out going through at night and in bad weather and things. Yeah, and the suggestion would be that the Turkish government have long since made it very dangerous to be underwater. Like, I don't know what concrete blocks and things there are under there.
Oh yeah.
But you know, it's one of those things. I mean, I think it's a real world thing. We can think up sort of James Bond scenarios of how to get in there. At the end of the day, if you have a proper submarine, even a small one, then you know, it's a political as well as just a practical question of how you get through that. Imagine if they had have tried doing a submerged passage or something, or that wouldn't play into the defense,
right,
of the justification. Right?
And so, I was going to ask you a question, but I guess I already know the answer to that. But like, you know, just for our listeners, you know, like, so beyond the Russian submarines that are out there, what else is in the Black Sea right now, submarine-wise?
Turkish submarines, and I think nothing else. Romania had one, a Kilo also actually, but that hasn't been to sea in years. It's not operable, and they're part of, you know, they're on the western side as it were now. So nothing really. It is Russian, and you know, Ukraine does. I mean, Ukraine normally has had some, but they're in de facto no. They might. I mean, Ukraine could arm itself with underwater vehicles of various types, and it's not impossible they could acquire submarines, but I don't think it's on the cards. It just isn't, and they're not going to. So it's basically Turkish and Russian.
And then these small drones too, the UUVs, they can be carried by land too, and right, you know, NATO or some NATO country can deploy it through Bulgaria or something like that out into the Black Sea.
I didn't even think about that.
So even a really big one. And theoretically a submarine if you're keen enough, but that's a bit far-fetched. I mean, submarines in World War II, some submarines did go by land, Italian ones, I think.
It would be a lot to transport that by land, even a small one.
Well, they were making submarines, but yeah. And I'd have to check the facts. You know, if anyone listening this, you know, here can figure out, I'm talking about CA class and CB class, I think. You know, check out how they got there. But so I'm going by memory, but it's, yeah, for sure. It's when we're talking about proper submarines, we're talking about going through on the surface in front of 1,000 cameras.
Now, if you transported it by land, would that be against this convention or no?
I don't think so. I think it would just completely be out of the scope of the convention. I don't know. Certainly, if you went through a different country. I mean, Turkey. I mean, I don't think Turkey are going to welcome you doing it, but you know, there's other countries you can go through.
Holy cow! Could you imagine just the Twitter storm you'd see of like, what is this big giant thing on this truck?
It's a Virginia class submarine. Yeah. Being deployed through Varna, Bulgaria.
It's a 2-story mobile home. Be quiet. You know, like, no, there's nothing. Don't worry about this. It's got a nice tower at the top so you can go out and look around. You know, don't worry about this. Don't worry about what's under this cover. You know, flying down the highway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about personal subs or you know, like private submarines and things like that. I don't know how that works out, or if they're owned by, you know, they're not owned by the government. I don't know.
Or if you're looking for sunken gold or something. What was that movie?
Or like a long-range SDV, you know, somebody you can just stick into a tube.
Yeah, there's some genuine wreck survey midget submarines, some of which are very similar to Navy boats. You know, we won't go into the guy in Denmark, but in Germany, the Euro sub, which is really, or Euronaut, I think it's called, and it's very cool. But I don't think they're even planning to go through the Bosphorus. But I mean, basically the treaty was written 90 odd years ago, and it's a bit outdated in many ways, but the spirit of it is pretty clear.
Right. All right. Anything else you want to talk about with the Russian submarine transiting through there?
It's interesting. Looking through Crimea is incredible. Looking through different things with satellite imagery. All like they've begun to set up anti-ship missile sites again throughout the region. Do you look at a lot of satellite imagery of there? Like if you look at south and southeast of Sevastopol, you'll randomly come across a few of them.
Yeah, he's got a article on it. Let me pull it up.
Yeah, I gotta say, I mean, I don't hugely follow. I'm not the most up to date on this stuff, but yeah, that's definitely the impression I get. There's a lot in. There's a lot of militarization, let's say, and it makes sense. I mean, it's not surprising, right? There's conflicts with Ukraine, in that region, and the Sea of Azov is a very touchy subject. That was a year ago or so. How long ago? They've given the boats back now, but you remember
Ukraine a little over a year ago, I think. Yeah.
So I mean, there's an interesting parallel there, and this is just an aside, but. And I haven't argued this through in my own head, but if you're arguing about whether or not submarines can go through the Bosphorus, which is entirely on both sides in a place is entirely going through Turkey, then you've got to think how consistent your arguments are with ships going through into the Sea of Azov, which is where they pass between Crimea and another part of Russia, mainland Russia, and Russia had blocked that when it felt that the Ukraine was going through that, even though Ukraine's got territory there. Now, I'm not going to, I think that can be discussed by other people, but it's an interesting aside. I don't think a lot of people are being very consistent with a lot of the arguments.
So, how important would the Bosphorus be in the event of a hypothetical war? Because Russia would want to be able to get out there into the Mediterranean, right?
Yeah. So Turkey, historically at least, has a very, very strong military, including quite a number of submarines, and can deploy those forces on both sides of the Bosphorus. And because it's not the Bosphorus is the most narrow part, but actually, once you're south of the Bosphorus, you go very close to Greece, which also has a large military. So you're vulnerable for a long way.
Yeah,
in World War III scenarios, if the Soviet Navy, back in the day, had wanted to punch its way through the Bosphorus, it feels that they probably could, if they were very ruthless about it. But but it's still a problem. There's still so many places where they're vulnerable. Oh. And I mean, the classic is, if you look in World War One, how mainly the British, but how the Western Allies attempted to operate in that area, and although they had some individual successes, I mean, it's strategically difficult place to be a navy.
Oh, there's no way. There's missiles everywhere. All I see is missile defense. Just missiles. There's a missile. There's a missile. There's a missile flying. There's another missile flying.
Those are islands.
But I know what you mean. They're shooting missiles from here and here and here.
And it's very mountainous. It's very hilly there too. So you could hide stuff.
Oh god.
Pretty easily.
There's no way. This gives me anxiety looking at this.
Trying to get through there in a submarine.
There's no way. Just ignore the missiles. Even if you try to go, under the water, this is horrific. I'm sure they got it pretty well mapped at this point. It's not like going through the Arctic.
Yeah. But, and I think, to an extent, NATO has an advantage, obviously, in the mapping and stuff, because, both Greece and Turkey, although they don't get on, obviously, as we all know, they're both on the NATO side, and so NATO definitely has a lot more access, let's say, to underwater world there. But Russia would know as well, and it would be it'd be an interesting scenario to do war games on.
Yeah, definitely. You don't need the GUIT gap. You got the G and C gap right here. I bet there's so much censorship right here. Censors, I should say.
Well, they're censoring the boats, because they actually have a pretty powerful. Russia has a pretty powerful Black Sea fleet. They have a whole bunch of different cruisers and stuff, but they also have I know they have is it the Moskva? The Moskva is there. Yeah. The Slava class.
Yeah.
Which I think is still tied up, though. I don't know if it's operational, but...
Yeah, I'm not sure. They have... the Black Sea fleet is definitely not the biggest fleet, and it's nothing in comparison to the Northern or Pacific fleets. But it's got quite a lot of firepower, and certainly compared to other navies in the region, individually. Turkey also... And there are, when you think about it, in the Mediterranean, there are a lot of other big navies which are very capable on their own. But Russia is definitely a powerful navy in the region. A lot of stuff seems to be a bit outdated, though.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up with the Joneses, man.
Yeah, just to interesting in the Mediterranean. Obviously, Italy and France and Greece and Turkey all have incredible navies, but and the Israelis in their own way have incredibly powerful capabilities. But then you go down and you look at what Egypt is doing, and and all the North African states are like Algeria. They've got quite a powerful navy now. Egypt has 2 helicopter carriers, so more helicopter carriers than Russia.
Yeah,
the ex-Russian ones, obviously. The French built ones, should I say?
Those are the ones that were actually meant for Russia.
Exactly. Yeah. And what's interesting is just a curiosity. The Egyptian helicopter carriers are the only place on the earth, I think, where you'll see Apaches and Holcomb, attack helicopters. I think they call them Nile crocodiles. It's the local name.
Yeah.
KA-50 related 52, I think. 2-seat ones, and on the same, they have Apaches and these Nile crocodiles on the same ship, which is curious. But yeah, so the Egyptian Navy is really interesting. I did a story on that. It's another one for people to look up. But it's really massively updating and going to be very, very powerful.
Yeah, I never think much of the Egyptian Navy. I just haven't looked into it enough.
Oh, no.
But, besides going back to different wars they had with Israel and different, missile boats they had. But recently, do they, I'm going to sound pretty dumb, do they have any submarines?
Egypt, yeah.
They do have submarines. Yeah. Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, they've been buying ones of Germany recently. They don't have a huge number, 4, I think. And they're very decent ones. They're not AIP. I mean, it's interesting. They're the last people to buy the 209 series. So in a sense, it's not the most modern model, but they got the most modern version of it. And it probably suits their needs. But they historically had a lot of submarines. They've still got some Romeo class, I think.
Oh.
Mostly they got from China, but they did get some from Russia as well. And they used to have a massive navy. A lot of US supplied, a lot of Russian supplied. Now French, now Italian. They've done a really big deal with Italy just recently.
They just don't discriminate at all, then, huh?
No,
they buy from everyone.
Yeah,
a bit like India. Like I was thinking, I haven't done this article, but a popularist article would be competition. Who's the most crazily international navy? It's either India or Egypt. It used to be. I mean, it would be that India is the only navy that seems to have every country's kit in some.
Even on one ship, I forget. I remember looking at different ships, and they have a sensor from here, a radar from there, missiles from Israel or something, and then
they do their own stuff.
Yeah.
Well, they're the ones that have
the.
They have the. What is it? They have a Russian submarine with a American sonar system. Somebody has that. I'm pretty sure it's the Egyptians.
Well, the Egyptians. The Egyptians, I think, more or less. I don't know the full details of the upgrades, but they're Russians or Chinese supplied Russian submarines were upgraded with Harpoon and probably quite a lot of other.
Right. Yeah, it has. Yeah, they shoot American.
They shoot harpoons.
Yeah. Oh, that's so funny, man.
Have you noticed a change in Egypt? I've talked to a few people who are living, or Egyptian, and in the army, and they've been talking about how they're dealing with a lot more Russian equipment now. Like Russian helicopters are buying a lot more Russian than they used to compared to what they used to do with American.
Yeah, so obviously Egypt at a time was very, Russia, Soviet Union, shall I say, saw them as a useful country to arm and gave them huge amounts of equipment and helpers, and it didn't serve them very well against Israel.
That would have been like pre-70s and earlier.
Yeah, exactly, 60s, 70s, and then after that, they started to get European and American support, and then in the Navy, that translated into Knox class frigates and things like that. I think an Oliver Hazard Perry, although I'm going by memory. So they got some US equipment and stuff, and their fighter aircraft. They had lots of US stuff come in. F-16s and things, and then more recently they also got a lot of Chinese stuff. Now that was also in the 80s, and that was pretty poor quality, and that was a lot of their Navy was Chinese supplied. I guess for cost is probably the easy answer, although I wasn't around at the time, so I wasn't paying attention. Now they have, in terms of modern acquisitions, they have Russian, French, Italian, German equipment side by side. It's all brand new, and some recent American stuff as well. Like they've got a crazy number of schooner delivery vehicles, very modern ones. I mean, now they're getting aged, but they, in the great scheme of things, they're big on American equipment as well for special forces. So they've got an incredibly eclectic navy. It's that's what I mean. It's like between them and India, who's got the I don't know what the answer is. It's they're going to compete with India for being the most mixed up navy. They're also, the neutrality of it might be a big part of that. Like they're hedging their bets as to who they can rely on.
Well, speaking of the Chinese, you have another article?
Yeah,
another definitely. One of your Forbes articles.
Yeah, so talking about the Chinese Navy starting to head over to the Indian Ocean. We've seen all the, like, I say we've seen, I don't know who's actually listening right now, but one of the things that's really been blowing up on Twitter lately is China and India, and just I say world news in general, China and India fighting it out, like literally, like had a fist fight. People hitting each other with sticks.
They've been doing that for years, but it turned deadly recently.
Yeah, supposedly. I guess the last thing I heard was they were beating each other with sticks wrapped with barbed wire and stuff like that. So it's pretty rough, but they have these brawls. But now you have some research talking about the Chinese Navy heading into the Indian Ocean. I was hoping you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So it's, I think that's part of the reason why I did the article. I think it's very topical and it connects to what's going on. The Chinese Navy has been operating in the Indian Ocean, particularly also in the Persian Gulf area, and the Arabian Sea, and that to protect against piracy. And they have a base in Djibouti. I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm butchering that name, but
yeah, it's kind of expected.
The base is only a few kilometers or miles away from the US base.
Oh yeah,
biggest base in Africa as it happens. But they built a fortress there, which is kind of interesting its own. There's an article on that. It's interesting its own. And today they actually released a video which shows their fortress. So maybe my article, encouraged them not to be willing to show it a bit more. I don't know.
That'd be awesome. Man, just like pushing foreign policy would be great, man. Yes.
Well, I don't want to steer any foreign. Yeah, I'm not in the business of steering anyone.
You're an influencer now. You have to expect it. This is what you do now.
Oh yeah, no. But yeah. So hopefully not. But, that's a scary thought. But another article. I mean, they're building there's been rumors, very very credible rumors that they're building a base in Pakistan, at Gadar. Again, a name I'm probably saying wrong, but and they're building a commercial port though, because that's to do with the maritime Silk Road, and that would, if they the more goods, the more goods they can offload at Pakistan and take them overland to China, they don't have to go around through the Strait of Malacca and stuff like that, and so less vulnerable to the Indian Navy and people like that. Singapore and all the other countries on the way. But they have deployed submarines to the Indian Ocean a few times and made port calls to Sri Lanka and to Pakistan particularly. And I'm not sure, the word is they've done quite a few, but we're talking ones you can count on a couple of hands. We're not talking 20, 30, we're not talking multiple or continuous presence. We're talking venturing into the Indian Ocean. Definitely they've done it, but it's not been, let's say it's not at a tempo, or I don't think it's at a tempo that anywhere compares to what the American and British submarines in the Arctic and stuff like that. It's nothing like a continuous presence or threat, but it could be. And they're building more and more nuclear submarines. They're going to continue to. They're going to soon build their first Type 95 and 96. 95 is the attack submarine, so that's a relevant one here. The 96 is the missile submarine, so they wouldn't move that into the Indian Ocean. But their attacks, I think it's pretty sensible to say that it could easily increase a lot more, and they could start doing it almost routine, especially with their nuclear subs. And once they're in the ocean, they don't necessarily have to go back. So, yeah. So it's interesting. So that was the article was about. It mentioned the different routes they can take to get into the Indian Ocean and the bases that they have in the Indian Ocean area. Although I'm not suggesting at the moment that they base any submarines in the Indian Ocean. They don't, but they could in the future.
How is the relationship with Malaysia and Indonesia? China, that is.
Complicated.
Like
China,
like with every single country around them, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And China right now seems to be a little bit more willing. This is post the virus sort of thing. Seems a little bit more willing to test almost every one of its potential conflict zones. Like they've been sending bombers and things nearer to Taiwan again. There's a submarine or a suspected submarine tracked by the Japanese.
Right.
There was a submarine or a suspected submarine being tracked by the Americans and Taiwanese breaking out into the Pacific, for example, just the other day. With Indonesia and those countries, it's very difficult because it's complicated because they're trading partners and China are rich and they're bigger. And if they wanted to be bullying, they could be. But they have very ambitious, let's say, territorial grains, which more or less put the whole South China Sea as Chinese. And other countries don't like that, naturally. So it's really complicated. There's no easy answer. But in a war scenario, what could Indonesia do to stop them going through? So what we're talking about is them taking shortcuts through Indonesian territory to get to the Indian Ocean in a more advantageous place than where they currently go, which they currently have to go through the Strait, or they would naturally go through the Strait of Malacca, or Malacca, I suppose is a better way of saying it. That's a maybe different route. You go through on water, it's shallow, and when you arrive in the Indian Ocean, there's now the Indian Navy is right there looking for you, or they could be. So if you take a shortcut further south, then you could potentially, even if they see you go, even if the Indian Navy know that you went through, their chances of actually being able to detect you once you're through, they're more likely to lose you, I'd say. And so it's interesting. And I think there's a lot of war fighting scenarios you could do that. And I probably will do some. I'm getting some expert opinions from people, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, that would be fun to read.
Yeah, definitely. So I wanted to switch over a little bit. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sutton.
The question is, how do I get a war fighting scenario short enough for a Forbes article? I don't know.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's going to end up like Red Storm Rising here, be 700
exactly.
pages.
It's a novel, isn't it? It's a novel, yeah.
And that's why I like it. That's what I like about your recognition books is they're like short to the point. It's now you can buy a Jane's book and it's so massive and so convoluted and there's so much information there.
You got to be rich to buy a Jane's book. So
yeah, that too. Yeah, I still haven't bought one yet.
Or you buy the 15-year-old ones. Like I got.
Yeah.
Fighting Ships 1994.
They're like $1,400, right? I think right now.
The new ones.
Yeah, we can look it up. I'm sure, but
I used to look at those in public libraries. That was one of the things. That's in my mind. The 1980s and 70s books like that is in my mind when I do that recognition guide.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, which I think is really blown up in the news, it always has been, is the Narco Submarines. I think that, I say privately owned submarines. I guess you can call them that if you really want to, but homemade, do-it-yourself submarines are some of the most amazing things on the planet. I'm going to actually kind of go through and pick through a few people in Europe and in the United States who are kind of like building their own submarines and stuff, but homemade submarines are just amazing. And when you have an incentive of millions of dollars to be made, you can make that submarine pretty cool, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be a submarine, depending on what your goals are, your incentives are. But you have become the narco submarine expert of anybody that I've ever heard of at this point, besides maybe the Coast Guard. But maybe you could talk a little bit about what's been going on with the narco submarines and a lot of the traffic and what your feeling is with it and where it's going to go, and just kind of an overall, general idea what's going on with it.
Yeah, so they're getting more of them. Most of them, I mean, people always point this out. I do use the term Narco Submarine, and I think it's a useful term, but they're mostly just low profile boats.
Right.
But crazy low profile. They're very hard to see, I've heard, and they're designed to be stealthy, at least to a practical level, and they're designed to carry drugs from Colombia mainly, or from Latin America to north to typically to Mexico. There's a few other routes. They come across to Spain and Africa probably. And there's similar things, not necessarily with submarines, but similar things from Africa to Europe and from Albania to Italy and things like that. So they're not unique as such. But the ones from Latin, from South America to going towards America and across to the Atlantic they're the most serious ones by far. And they've become pretty standard over time, and they're getting more and more. But recently, in April the 1st, the US, Trump announced enhanced counter-narcotics operations. So the US is putting much more Navy resources into it, and that's a change. Obviously, the Coast Guard's still involved in any interdict. When you actually board a Navy ship, can't actually board a narco sub for legal reasons, US legal reasons. But they just have Coast Guard people on board. So there's lots more resources. So that should result in more captures. But the fact they're still catching them just shows that they're working. They're getting more and more, and they must be working.
Yeah, enough of them must get through to make it worth it then, right? To keep running them.
Yeah, precisely. Estimates are somewhere between 5 and 20% get caught, let's say. I did a very conservative, or 5 or 15% even. I did a very conservative estimate that if 20% were caught or detected other ways, then you add it up, you're still getting to like 1,000 have been built since 2005, 2006.
And you're making enough money, and the people driving these things too aren't like kingpins or anything like that high up. It's just some guy, right? You pay enough money, a couple $100 to, and he goes, right, for several day trip.
Yeah, well, that's the interesting thing. They're quite skilled, at least the skipper is. I mean, I think it's easy to criticize, or to mock them, and people do, but it actually takes a fair bit of guts to do it, I think, and they're very knowledgeable. So it's a lot of fishing captains, and they're knowledgeable for fishing and stuff. They are nautically minded, let's say, and they get paid in cash, I think. So, which rather than drugs. So, a lot of people along the way are being paid in drugs, and that's much better for the cartels, but in many ways, not least you make them dependent and criminal, and But these guys, if they're paid in cash, that tells you how valuable they are.
Oh, okay. I was thinking more of the people just go across the border here in Mexico to the U.S.
So they basically load you on this boat with a bag full of cash that you can spend in wherever you're going to go.
If you make it.
I don't know that. I don't know quite how they go around paying you and the pet and your family and that, and what happens if you're caught and all that. But I think they still treat them pretty well, because overall they treat them pretty good, because there's a constant supply of new ones and they're being paid. They're not. Because I don't think you can threaten someone to get on a boat and go somewhere and expect them to arrive. You know what I mean? They used to put armed guards on the boats. I think less so now. So there used to be a 4-person crew, one of whom had a weapon and was the armed guard. I think that's less common now. Crews are getting smaller.
I mean, you can't fight back. You saw here, and I'll pull up the video so you guys can see the DVs.
I don't think the armed guard is against customs.
I mean, there's not much you can do about this. If they've got you, they've pretty much got you. Yeah. There's no point in putting armed guards now. You got to make the submarine.
Well, the armed guard would be to stop the crew stealing it, and to stop, and for when you get there and you're dealing with people coming out in boats to pick up the goods and stuff like that. I think it's that sort of. I'm not suggesting they in any way wanted to, fight against the Coast Guard. They're going to lose.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty much over at this point. even if you don't open the hatch, you'll see this guy kind of come out there and open the hatch, but it's over.
There's a bit of story that they used to try. Sometimes they'd try to get into another country's territory to make it so that the Coast Guard would have to get permission, all that sort of stuff. Whatever. That half works not very well anymore. They used to scuttle them, set fire to them, whatever, because the Coast Guard would have to rescue the crew. Naturally, the Coast Guard would be duty bound to rescue the crew and let the ship sink, and then there wouldn't be any evidence. But since it's now illegal just to be on the boat as an unregistered semi-submersible, blah, blah, then that actually makes it safer because it disincentivizes the scuttling the boat, because there's always a risk that you're going to drown.
Yeah.
So stay on the boat, let the Coast Guard arrest you, and because you're not going to, there's not going to be any different from a...
Can they dump? Because sometimes when you see them use the boats, they'll dump the drugs overboard.
Yes.
They can't do. Can they do anything like that on a submarine? The submersible?
It's much less likely to be on a semi-sub than on a go fast or something like that, Chris. Because a go fast, you just open, you're right there. But even some go fasts would struggle because they're covered. But so on a narco sub, if you were to do that, you would start sinking because you'd
exactly. Yeah. You're underwater. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's certainly risky. And you'd do it in very small amounts, because a lot of them are open at the back. Actually, they're not. But you're chucking a bale out every 20 seconds. You're gonna there's a few tons.
Yeah.
6 tons is, I'd say, the average. Yeah. That's 1,600 bricks of cocaine. Each brick is 1 kilo. Kilos. That's about 2 pounds, but they work in kilos. And so, and then they tie them together as bales, which do float, but they're heavy.
Yeah, and the funny part is, even if you tossed it, they're going to GPS mark it, and we could find it if we really wanted to. We're not going to send the resources down there more than likely to go find some cocaine at the bottom of the ocean, but we could find it. If we really wanted to, we could find it.
Yeah, there's a case where they scuttled, this is going back some time, but they did scuttle the Narco Sub, and divers were Navy got divers, I think. I think they were Navy. Certainly Navy helped. I don't know which agency sort of did the claim, but they do throw it into water quite frequently from go fast, and government do, like whether it's Coast Guard or other partners, it's often the local coast, local Navy or police or whatever from Panama or wherever, Guatemala, Costa Rica, that intercept, that pick it up.
Yeah, that's super interesting. You could just watch the low profile vehicles. They're really hard to find.
Yep.
Yeah. So how much money have you ever done the math or seen how much the value of one of these that does make it?
So the normal quoted value by law enforcement is in the region of $35 million per load. And I think it's normally the wholesale value, but exactly where that fits in, I haven't really I'm not the person to ask on. My interest disappears when it goes beyond some of the vehicles. But it's quite a lot of money, and it costs. It varies, but between $1 and $2 million to build.
To build them?
Yeah. Things are expensive, more expensive than people might realize. You've got to get all the goods, get the fiberglass and all that in the right place. It's marine plywood. It's not just hacked out and stuff. And the engines and the people, and they normally got, give or take, you can have 9-10 people working on it, possibly more. They have a lot of armed guards around and things like that. But having said that, when obviously you do the maths, it's very profitable, and most get through. So there's no, clearly it works.
So my question is, okay, so once it gets there, right? So does Mexico and all these countries have this giant influx of submarines that have just abandoned, or what do they do with them once they get there?
They try to sink them. So there will be what they call graveyards under the ocean. I think that'd be really interesting. So you can imagine off the coast of Mexico particularly, but all up the coast, there are in the region of, I'm going to say I would guess about 800 or more sunken narco subs.
Wow, 800 or more.
Wow, man, I would love to see that.
Yeah, I mean, most of them are up the Pacific coast. I mean, when I say 800 more, I'm trying to do the maths on maybe let's make it a bit fewer less, but whatever it is less,
750 or more.
The Caribbean,
wow.
Or, going up. I reckon about 1,000 to be built, and majority, about less than 200 being caught, 1,000 being built, and nearly everyone that hasn't been caught has been sunk and scuttled. Now, more recently, when I say caught, that includes ones that wash up on beaches. More recently, they're getting worse at sinking. Certain types aren't as good at scuttling, and they actually wash up in Costa Rica or something. Huh. But it's a graveyard out there, and they're probably all on top of each other more or less, because there'll be certain patterns they're using. The local people who have to come and get the goods and carry on the trip.
Yeah, right. So is it just not worth trying to reuse them, trying to bring them back?
It's probably, yeah. I mean, short answer is it's not worth it.
Yeah.
The crew probably don't want to take them back. They've just done a pretty hard trip in a couple of weeks on a tiny boat, and in the Pacific isn't going to be that fun. Supplies and all things like that. There's just risk of taking them back, and most of them aren't. They're not really built for multiple trips. Even the most elaborate ones that you could say are fully submersibles, or very close to being, the ones that look like a submarine. So these are the rarest ones. They've not a single one has been found at sea, but several have been found in forests, in the jungle where it's artisan workshops where they build them. So we know they exist. And there are crazy rumors going. So those ones, really elaborate, really impressive on a certain level. Certainly ingenuity and that. They're built for one-way trips. There's one or two which you can say probably weren't. So there's one, and there's stories of one that did several trips, just a regular one. But there's also there was one that was found. This is a long time. This is about 20 years ago. So before, Narco Subs as we know them now started about 15 years ago. But there are, of course, if you go back in history, plenty of earlier precursors. And one of them was a submarine built to Russian plans, probably in the middle of Colombia, miles away from the sea. And it was built out of steel and was thoroughly professional and could have done multiple trips. So that one was 30 meters, 100 foot long. That was a submarine that was bigger than the ones in service with the Colombian Navy at the time.
Oh my god, that's crazy, man.
It's just weird thinking there's a whole submarine world out there that is completely invisible. I mean, even more so than a normal submarine. I mean, we know a lot more about Chinese submarines or something than we do about these. Man, and it's incredible that they just then ditch them and then build new ones.
Yeah, they mass produce them now. So again, anyone who's got my book realizes this. At the beginning, each one was different, and you saw some that were a bit similar to the last one, or that. But it's really now you can get in some cases 10, 15 that are essentially identical. Huh. And and I divide them into families, and so I'll say this instance is the same builder as that one. It's like they mass produced over a course of years.
So they found out a design that works, and they go with it.
Yeah, exactly. And they might make tiny refinements over time, and there are variations usually of them. But it's like real submarines. You start having variants. You have like the kilo and the improved kilo, this sort of stuff. It's the same on Narco Subs. You have sort of I give them codes because there isn't a name. We don't know what they call them, and there certainly isn't a standard naming convention. One. So I give them codes, but you have sort of version 1, a version 2, a version 3.
Eric, how would you like to serve on one of those?
No, never. Absolutely not. And the thing is they make it. I don't know how many have been lost, but that's another question: is who knows how many didn't make it? But holy cow, man!
And I think people have said from their perspective that their survival rate is going to be higher than the go fasts and the go slows, the pangers.
Yeah, that makes sense to me because they have to be structural, like really structurally tight, right? Like they seem to seal them up with layers and layers of fiberglass or whatever. I guess they're all fiberglass mostly. Like, what are these hulls made out of?
99% of fiberglass and wood, marine plywood. So they use the frame from marine ply, and then sometimes some layering of marine plywood, but it's mainly fiberglass.
Keep them light. Put more on it. Yeah.
Man, it's crazy. Like all the crap you have to go through to like build a reactor, but you can build a submarine with fiberglass and marine wood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and they're not fully submersing, but they're definitely putting up with some harsh weather, some waves and things. And I reckon a lot don't make it, but again, clearly most do, else they wouldn't be able to find a crew and they wouldn't bother with it. Yeah, and I think now with the virus and stuff, if anything, on the one hand, they're being persecuted more by the Navy, but on the other hand, other routes that they're using are sort of drying up. It's hard, marine cargo's been affected by the downturn and all that, and the go fast. And so if you are being chased by the Navy a lot more, there's more Navy ships, more aircraft being dedicated to finding you, then these are going to still be more successful than the go fasts and the go slows, just the regular boats.
Right.
So I think all these factors together probably mean more narco subs, not fewer.
That's awesome. So, stepping back a little bit to China, we had one of the guys in our I say guy, I have no idea. I shouldn't say guy. People. I say guys as people, but I don't want somebody to take it wrong. Right. But somebody in the chat room was asking, sub warfare the best advantage is submarine warfare the best advantage the U.S. has over China and others?
Oh, it's an interesting question. Not one I've thought about, but I think you can make an argument of that. There's a lot of other things. I mean, there's just talking about naval hardware and sort of not nuclear missiles and stuff like that. Just talking about naval hardware. Obviously, the main aspects are going to be aircraft carriers and submarines. They're the most potent. They're apex predators, and submariners will tell you, that they are. If of those two, the one you want to use, aircraft carriers have got a lot more to worry about submarines than vice versa. Even though aircraft carriers are what carries the best anti-submarine, asset, which is a patrol aircraft. Mostly helicopters these days, unfortunately. So that's the thing. I mean, back in the day, they had Vikings and whatever, and trackers and those sorts of aircraft on aircraft carriers. Now they have helicopters, so it's less so. But I think you can really make that argument. There's the interesting perspectives, though, are that even a pretty old rubbish submarine is still an apex predator because, every submarine is a threat, even a rubbish. I say rubbish. Even one that is vintage and noisy and all this sorts of stuff. It's still
North Korean. Just saying.
Yes, precisely. And exactly. But also the Chinese ones and that people say are noisier, and they are. Although they've got the most AIP submarines, so air independent power or propulsion, if you want. Submarines in the world is going to be Chinese, I think. I'm pretty sure. But the other interesting angles are, just to throw in some interesting things, the maritime militia, the armed guard, the commercial maritime guards on ships, and that's like private security companies, and also the Coast Guard and all the other agencies which go with it, like all the other variations of Coast Guard. In all those fields, I think China has a growing, not going to say advantage, but definitely a growing presence, and it's a different, there's a different dimension to things, especially in limited war scenarios. So you'd throw in that as well. Like their maritime militia, like every fishing boat, not literally every fishing boat, but a substantial number of fishing boats are aligned to their naval goals.
Yeah, it seems that China's definitely using a lot of they're almost like secret boats. Like they just look like they're like unmarked cars. Like police officers, they use just some granny's car and they're like pulling people over in it. You know, it's kind of like that, where it's like just a fishing boat, but they use it as like a maritime militia, almost like a surveillance boat maybe, or maybe it's got hidden guns on it. Who knows? Or it could be strapped with explosives. It's weird.
Yeah, they've got a lot of spy ships and stuff like that, and a lot of their coast guard's very big, and they're also their maritime surveillance agency, which is, I think, still separate. They've done some changes to their coast guard. They're now actually more openly militarizing their coast guard. But they're the largest coast guard. So, I mean, simple question: which country has the largest coast guard cutter? Well, it's easy. It's China. It's not America.
Right. Yeah, because they got a lot of coast to cover, right? With all their island building.
Your coast guard is very impressive in lots of ways, as are the related things like the naval service and all that. It's really impressive. But in fact, I've got an article tomorrow about the U.S. Naval Service, so watch for that. But so that's all really impressive. But if you did a chart of Coast Guard vessels by country, I mean, I haven't added it up. I don't, but I bet China is number one, or certainly up there. And in terms of the biggest ones, China.
And it's so shallow over there too, right off the coast of China, the East China Sea and all that, right? It's so shallow, it's going to be very difficult to get a submarine in there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's why they like the South China Sea.
Oh yeah, because it does get much deeper off that. What's the name of the naval base there? What's the name of that big naval base in?
Sanya, and you know,
to be able to get deeper out.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I'm not big on those naval bases.
And island at the bottom, Sanya. Again, there's a local name for it. I forget it. I'm hesitating to try to say it from memory when I'm going to butcher it. But so South China Sea, they deploy then most of their nuclear submarines, their missile boats, but also their fast attack boats, and they deploy aircraft carriers there regularly and quite a large naval. Yeah, they've got a lot of destroyers and cruisers. The cruisers aren't there yet, but they're coming.
Yulin, that's what I'm thinking of.
Yulin. Oh yeah, Yulin naval base. Yeah, with the submarine tunnels.
Yeah. Yes, it's the one I was calling Sanya. That's where it is.
Yeah, it is right next to it. How many boomers do they have?
6 or 8.
6 or 8
at the moment. Yeah, there's the question is how many are operational. It's a bit complicated.
That's always the question, right? And even operational, it's not even just operational. Like that thing could go out, it could go out and dive, but are the torpedo tubes working? Like, could it even actually do anything? Because even if torpedo tubes work and you could shoot water slugs and it sounds like you're shooting them, maybe the loading mechanism's broken, and you can't load torpedoes, right? You know, there's a lot of variance when it comes to operational. There's a huge spectrum of it, right? So I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, the Chinese do not use their ballistic missile submarines in the same way from a doctrine perspective than, say, most Western countries, where it's a continuous at-sea deterrent. They just never. I mean, I'm not well read on it. I'm sure there are a lot of people who know a lot more about this than me. But it's evident that they haven't tried very hard to do that. They keep them in port a lot, and they never achieve the same level of operational. But they're getting better and better, and they're getting more and more. So the answer is, if we say 6 or 8, it'll be more next year than it is this year. They'll probably retire some of the older ones soon, and because some of them are quite old, but most of them are relatively modern. And they're going to launch a new version called the Type 096, which is going to almost certainly be a lot.
Yeah. Do you see them then expanding a lot more, building up a fleet like closer to that of Russia or the U.S.?
Yeah, definitely in that direction. They're going to overtake. I mean, they've already overtaken in numbers, but in terms of capability, I mean, I'd still put them behind Britain and France. France is interesting because France has not, it doesn't try to maintain a continuous at-sea deterrent, or in the recent past anyway. Russia didn't either, by the way, for many years, but now Russia does, and they're gonna overtake those countries very quickly, both in terms of hull numbers, but also by the potency. The thing is, their missiles aren't as long range, and they keep them where they are. They're definitely strategically disadvantaged. If they can find a way of getting them into the Pacific securely and in frequency, then they'll be much more dangerous, certainly to the United States. But if you're a country like India, then there's enough to worry about right now.
Yeah. Is that something they're trying to do? Because they're kind of walled off a little bit, right? Vietnam they're not in best terms with Vietnam. Philippines is hit or miss sometimes, goes back and forth. And then you have Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. It kind of forms a wall blocking them in there.
Exactly, so they got these chains of they have disputes with every country. I think I'm not sure. Maybe there's they don't, but really from north to south. I mean, not North Korea, I don't think, but South Korea they definitely have issues with. Japan massively, Taiwan of course, and going south, Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and so on. Singapore possibly not, but I don't know. But certainly, they have territorial disputes with everyone. And but if they were to secure any of those, if they were to secure any of the ones that are at the barrier, mainly Japan and Taiwan, if they were to secure a big enough physical footprint on that line, then they could start doing it. So if they take over Taiwan, then it's end. They've then got the Pacific.
And you wrote an article on that recently too. You talked about different ships that would be involved if they did go in after Taiwan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's less about submarines, but yeah, it's interesting just because I'm watching them really build up their amphibious warfare capability massively. So they've still got some challenges, and I think you can still have a debate over whether to do it. But in the 90s, and I couldn't find who first said this, but someone said that because they'd threatened invasions always, of course, but it would be the million man swim, because there wasn't how they'd get there. There wasn't, although they had landing craft and things, there really wasn't a viable way that they could land enough troops. Now it's very different. Now they have at least 2, and it's going to be more, of course, assault carriers. So these are large helicopter carriers with amphibious docks for hovercraft, which they have. They have a load of hovercraft. The journey is quite short. They have some Zuba, like these massive hovercraft as well, just a few. And they have a couple of aircraft carriers, and they're building more. They're doing a third one at least, and we're expecting it to go up, beyond that. And you can argue that any of these are not individually better than other countries, but as a force, that's massive, and it's a world of difference. And the destroyers, I mean, I was thinking of doing an article on this, it's just so interesting. If you were to take a photograph of them, like around about 2000, so 20 years ago, if you take a photograph of the naval parade of a Chinese Navy and compare it to every other Navy on the world, you'd say, well, they're big, but they're so outdated. And they've got virtually no air defense. And now if you do the same, you're looking at aircraft carriers, massive number of submarines, the biggest submarine fleet in the world, mostly quite modern, or largely modern. Massive destroyers. They're building cruisers. They call them large destroyers, I think, but building cruisers, impressive. Huge. They're building. I think they built 9 large warships last year. And how many does America build? There's a number. I made an article on that. Exactly. Some people are not very happy that I made an article on that, but because there is a context there. They're building up from nothing,
right,
from something terrible, and it's still not. So US still has better destroyers.
Oh yeah. I think we have like 65 right now, Arleigh-Burke class destroyers. Yeah. Exactly.
And I don't know what you count, but they might be at 30 or something like that now. But they're building huge numbers, and so in 5-10 years' time, you can't dismiss them forever. And I think there was always a thing about sleeping dragon, I think, was it? And people have prophesized that they would be big and powerful. Now they really are, but people are still doubting it somehow.
And I found that scenario fascinating because, like you were saying, you got to get your troops across. And I kind of looked it up here. It's about 150 kilometers across, or about 100 miles.
Yeah.
It depends on from where to where exactly on the islands, but you have to get a lot of troops and a lot of equipment, a lot of stuff over there as quick as possible too, right? You got to get there quick.
Yeah.
Land everything, seize certain areas that you need to control, take out different missile sites and everything they have in Taiwan.
Yep. Taiwan would fight back, I think, and Taiwan has an impressive navy and impressive military in general.
They do, yeah.
And it, I mean, but China, but it's much more credible now. It's not like it was in the 90s where you could laugh it off. It's no, you think they've got a massive fleet of merchant ships that they could utilize, and they do have an official, just like a lot of countries. They're not the only. This isn't unique to them, but they have schemes where they can commandeer merchant roll-on, roll-off ferries and use them and things, and you think they're massive. I did say, China's a maritime nation, and people laugh at that. And you look at how much ships they build and how many they use and how many they own and all this sort of stuff. It's if anyone could invade Taiwan, China could.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
And then I think I remember reading somewhere that actually in Taiwan they had anti-ship missiles on the back of trucks, and they would just drive them around. They continuously drive around so they can avoid being targeted by China.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have some interesting things. They have surface-to-air missiles in bunkers, which I think they're the only country I can think of that does that now.
I know North Korea does that. I think Iran does that too.
Well, I mean, in silos, so in not just hide them in bunkers, but actually
launch from bunkers. Yeah. I think there was a few drawings on Iran. I don't know if I've ever actually seen one in real life, or obviously not in real life, but in a satellite image or anything. I know I saw a few diagrams, but I don't know if they ever went through with it. And what do the U.S. You would think that maybe the U.S. or China or U.S. or Japan or South Korea or something would come to the defense of Taiwan if China did try to invade, but do you think there would even be time for that?
So let me and before you answer that, Sutton, I want to give you like a little anecdotal evidence of what I experienced being in the submarine force, right? So once we moved over, so I was on the USS Hampton. Once we moved, we did a change of home port from Norfolk to San Diego. On the way there, we had to go through the canal and get over there, and they started briefing us on like, hey, we're in a whole different environment now. It's not Russia anymore. It's not the Mediterranean. Now it's Pacific. So now you got to deal with, China, Russia, all these other adversaries that are doing other things over there. And so one of the things my chief told me about was Taiwan. I didn't know anything about it. I'm like 23, didn't give a damn about any of it. I don't care about none of it. I don't care. It's like as long as I get home, I don't care. So he's explained it to me, and he goes, one of the things you got to understand about Taiwan, it's like this little island out there, and there's just really shallow water in between this really short path. So somehow, if we were to defend Taiwan, we have to get our submarine over the north or the south side of this island and get in there and start attacking people. How are you supposed to do that? And at this time, this isn't, I was in the Navy between 2002 and 2008. So this is like 2005 when they only had diesel subs. And they were like, they just sit them on the bottom. They just sit there and listen. And being on a nuclear submarine, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that's a thing? He's like, yeah, they just turn everything off. They're just battery powered submarines, right? And so he's like, it's really dangerous. And we, as submariners, need to understand if that happens, we have to go in there and defend these people. And we may have to drive over this area that may have mines, submarines, surface ships that are attacking us. And we got to get in there and defend them. That's what we're going to do. And there's only a few of us, right? I mean, there's only so many on the Pacific side. This is when we started doing what they called the 60-40 split, where the Navy brought a lot of the Navy from the Atlantic side to the Pacific side because the Cold War ended. And that was when we all started getting these briefings, and I was just like, holy shit, this is real. Like, this is what we're about to do, and we're about to go on a Westpac. I'm not saying we did anything in China while we were there, but they were just kind of briefing us on the whole area.
And that was 15 years ago, right?
Yeah, that was 2006, 7, 8, so, somewhere in there.
10, 15 years ago. It's changed a lot since.
Before the AIP submarines and stuff,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they have nuclear power submarines, right? So
and it's so shallow, like you were saying. Look at the lighter areas. More now.
Yeah, anybody who plays Cold Waters, the South China Sea is the worst.
Oh, that one campaign. Oh,
yeah, because everything's it's so shallow. You can't run away. You can't just dive in the deep and run away, which is what submarines do. You know, they just dive away.
You're either broaching or on the surface, or you're smacking into the ground. That's it.
Yeah,
it's like 100 feet, 150 feet, maybe.
Yep, and you know, especially in the shallow waters, the sound will bounce. You know, top, bottom, bottom, top, bottom.
And so you can hear from far away, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, it gets a little diluted pretty quickly. But, you know, when you're over the Marianas Trench, that sound just disappears. It never comes back, right? Yeah. Unless you hit something. So, you know, that's a really, really tough area, man. I mean, it's such a bad area for submarines. That is not where you want to be. Offensively, anyways. Defensively, it's perfect because you could just pick all your pawns, put them out where you want, and then just wait for it. But trying to get in there and not having a fucking clue of what or where is what is that it really blew my mind. It really scared the shit out of me, to be honest. I was really I mean, not worried about China attacking, but it really kind of made me realize what I was doing at that point. I'm not just on a tube that goes from a number to a number and then comes back up. Like, well, I'm actually out here doing stuff. So you know, but you know, do you think that submarine warfare would be a big part of a Taiwan invasion? Because I feel like it would be a very surface heavy, aircraft heavy area, and I don't even know if you could get one in there at this point with all the ASW and everything that's pinging around that place. If it really went down, I think the whole area would just be covered in sonobuoys. Well, you know, what is your feeling about it?
I think, yeah, I mean, yes and no. I don't want to. Yeah, I think it would mainly be those other assets, and certainly the news stories would all be that other stuff, and it'd be very visible, right? There'd be a landing craft. I mean, I don't think obviously one of the points is that with the new amphibious capabilities that China has and the aircraft carrier battle group and all that sort of stuff, then it could operate in the Pacific and come from the other side, which it couldn't have done when you were being briefed. Right? So that's changing the game. That's one of the part of the strategy. Now, of course, that's if the U.S. Navy lets them. I think the view would still be that if the U.S. Navy is on side, especially in a full war scenario, then that covers the Pacific side of the island, the deep water side. But the shallow water on the other side, you know, that's still a problem. How do you get submarines in there? The Chinese could use submarines in there quite effectively because, you know, for a number of reasons, they've got the natural advantage there. But we're talking diesel subs and stuff. I think submarines can play a big part, but it'll probably be unseen. I don't think it's a submarine war as such. The other variable, of course, is, you know, if they choose to, if it's a limited war. So and this is just a scenario, because obviously there are times in the past when I think some countries' support of Taiwan has been more overt. So if they invade and the international response is slow, or if it's something like we will deploy troops to bolster, but we're playing by these rules because we don't want to, you know, we're going to limit the war to just Taiwan, and basically if America or any other country that's trying to help handicaps itself with, you know, clauses and rules of engagement that are anything less than all-out shooting.
Yeah.
Then
because I don't want to become a target.
Yeah, it could be a lot more complicated. You could have Chinese submarines wreaking havoc, or the threat of them. Yeah.
Right.
And it's a lot more. I think I see the same with the scenario coming into the Indian Ocean. When I think about that, I'm thinking everything from peacetime to limited war of every shade through to open war. And I think a lot of people just jump straight to open war. Certainly comments I get on Twitter or whatever. And it's like, oh, you just sink them. It's like, what? You know, for real? Yeah. Australia's going to sink Chinese ships just to help India, you know, and similar sort of thing. You know, like, are the Australians going to come to the help of Taiwan, you know, or is it going to take them a week of debating in Parliament before they start sending anything? You know, so on the Taiwan scenario, I think the question is how long how quick can China do it? And China would be worried about being too slow. And this is actually, so I in my article I quoted B.A. Friedman, who's an expert, much more expert than me, and his basic answer is if they can do it quick, they'd want to do it quick, and the longer it takes them, and the more blood is left, the harder it becomes.
Oh yeah,
politically. So it's interesting. Yeah.
It seems kind of like the new the GIUK gap for them. Compared to the Cold War with the Soviets, they wanted to break out into the Atlantic by getting through that, and they talked about, Red Storm Rising here. It was a big scenario to invade and take over Iceland, so then they can, sever that the SOSUS network and be able to get submarines and everything out into the Atlantic. And now it's the same thing with, but with China and Taiwan, because they kind of have a gap there, like we were talking about with Japan, and Taiwan, and the Philippines, and all that.
Japan just recently announced they're quite good at telling you these things. They'd never tell you what country they would say that a foreign submarine was detected going through these islands and Pacific, and they tracked by X, Y, Z. And I mean, everyone interpreted that as probably Chinese. I think that's right. I don't think they would have done that announcement if it was American, for example. So yeah, there's China is. All those islands. It's not just a Taiwan, which is a big island, let's say, at least generally. But it's these tiny islands. Some of them no people on, and they're all part of this chain that keeps China from the Pacific. So they're all vulnerable.
Yeah, but if they had Taiwan, then they would have access. Like you said, on the eastern side of Taiwan, it's in the Philippine Sea. That's where it gets real deep. And then they can just go out wherever they needed to deploy subs without being detected or anything.
Yeah, and exactly. And but the small islands as well. I mean, each one's got pros and cons, but they would see it as an advantage to have any of those islands.
Interesting.
Yeah, the whole area is just it's so tactically. It just gives them so much advantage. It's just so dramatic around here. So I mean.
So could you see a potential scenario of China then not invading Taiwan, but invading, I don't know what the name of these islands are, south of Taiwan but north of the Philippines?
Yes.
Like just causing a bunch of, saying that these are our, historical lands, going back to, 500 BC or something, we have control over them.
Or not even that, like land building next to them and just claiming them, right?
Yeah. And then that way, then they... start settling, build up an air base there, naval port, and then there you go. Now you got access out into the Pacific.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I think that broadly, the chain of islands between Japan and Taiwan is right for that, and there's some territorial claims there, some disputed islands, and similarly between Taiwan and Philippines, and I don't know if there's any dispute. I don't know the full details on territory there, but certainly if they could, and I mean, there's even rumor, and I think reports. Let's say I think it's more than a rumor that Philippines might allow China to operate from Subic Bay.
Yeah, it seems one of the things that I've found kind of odd about it is unless there's a big war, there's no island grabbing, right? So if you build something, it's pretty much going to be yours if you can defend it. And I think China at this point has a big enough, naval force to defend pretty much whatever they build out there. Nobody's going to really question it. You'd have to, the Navy would have to forward deploy so much asset to an island to take it or defend it. What do you think about? Just popping up an island randomly somewhere and just, saying, "Hey, we've got this whole area out in the middle of the Pacific." If they could island build that deep.
Well, it's an interesting scenario. Again, if anyone can do it, China can. I realize every 5 minutes I say, "Oh, I did an article on that," but yeah, there's they do a lot of sand mining from dredging, essentially in open ocean, and it's quite environmentally dangerous. And they do it with it's debatable legality. I mean, generally it's illegal, but it's hard to pin down. And they use it for reclaiming land. They are experts at reclaiming land, and both you see that on the atolls in South China Sea, but you also see it all along their coast. And other countries they're not alone in that capability, right? But they're massive on it. They have the infrastructure that I don't know if they do it in deep water. You'd choose your right place, but yeah, I'm not going to suggest that's a highly likely scenario, but it's an interesting one. And it comes down to, if there was a country on the planet that could do that, it'd be China.
Yeah, I mean they're so good at it.
Yeah, I was looking at the videos came out 4, 5, 6 years ago or whatever it was when they were building those islands. But I was looking at, I think it was from a P3 or a P8, the camera where it's, they're flying off miles and miles away, but they're zoomed in and you see these big tankers, these big ships,
right,
just pumping sand into the air, just massive, massive amounts of sand. It's incredible.
Yeah, it's really impressive in an industrial sense. Yeah,
and there's dozens of them too doing that.
Ships. Yeah. You can see them on sensors, so you can see them on satellite imagery between Taiwan, and they're just dredging, probably for Hong Kong Airport and projects like that. But so they're dredging sand from the open ocean, and there are I can't count them, but like 70, 80 ships all in one satellite image, massive number. It looks, and I've got that on my again Forbes. I've got an article on that. But it's just incredible, even from satellite image of the open ocean, and there are just humongous numbers of ships dredging sand and taking off to back to China, and they're there every day for months on end, coming and going.
Yeah, see if you could pull. Maybe we could pull the video just for fun. Type in South China Sea. Maybe you can find it. Sorry, bear with us. We're trying to jump around back and forth here for the people watching on YouTube, at least.
Yeah, I'm going to try to pull this video up.
And go to video. I'm sorry. I do it all the time. I'm so used to doing it. There you go, video. Just expect everyone to know this stuff.
Speaking of which, this is DVids. This is DVids, by the way. So this is like the U.S. open source video that you can use for whatever you want. If you guys don't know anything about DVids, this is like one of the most amazing resources on the planet for anything military. So
you could find footage of anything. Anything and everything.
Anything. And it's all up to date. This is all the militaries of the U.S. It's so great. So here, we're going to pull up
visit video page. And it's not the greatest quality because this is from 2015, from miles away. But look at that.
Wow.
Just pumping. And that's sand. That's sand.
That's sand, man.
And they're sucking this from the bottom of the ocean, right? Do you know much about this?
I can't see the video because right in a second.
It takes a minute.
Imagine, yes. So there's two ways you can do it. In shallow water, they just pump it straight out, and all the dead fish with it. And in deeper water, they can pump it. Yeah, they can do the same thing, but put it on a barge and then take the barge to where they want. They call it a self-propelled barge. It's essentially a ship. And take it where they want, and and they're pretty seaworthy. They're pretty big, and so they can just take the sand from one place and put it in another.
That's so impressive. You can't see it yet, but they're about to zoom out, and you just get a full spectrum.
Dozens of ships. Thing. Yeah.
I mean, it looks like they're getting ready to create a whole atoll. You know what I mean?
A whole new nation, Atlantis.
There's a whole like new Chinese bikini atoll sitting out there. Wow.
And they put, just so you know, they put sensor networks on these, and for sure, and they have them floating. They also have floating ones, so they've basically got radar and sonar coverage of the South China Sea, on a scale that is quite impressive.
I didn't think about that. Yeah.
So they have buoys that are or movable platforms with radars on, unmanned, uncrewed, and it's an interesting idea. This question: why doesn't someone go and interfere with them? And maybe they do, but de facto they've got a network of sensors across the South China Sea that, mostly in international waters or in waters that they claim and other people dispute, and I'm sure they've got an underwater. They call it underwater Great Wall, but they basically got a sensor network underwater as well. It's very bold. It's other countries don't do that, right?
Man, that's wild.
I think it's a good point you brought up earlier. Like, what are you going to do? There's so many different scenarios. There's peace, and then there's a regional conflict, and then it slowly escalates in a whole bunch of different degrees up until full-scale war. Like, what are you going to do to stop them? Are you going to send a bunch of U.S. ships and just park there to try to stop them or interfere or block them? I mean, you can't do that.
That's what's so crazy about the Chinese Maritime Navy, right? They're a bunch of fishing boats. They're just employing anybody they can. Like, the entire country is just employing everybody. It's like Dunkirk of, like, building islands, you know? Like, it's everybody. Everybody who can help, just come and help us build sand barges, you know? Yeah, exactly.
It's crazy. I think you can. I mean, you could go and sit there and stop them, but it's at some point, I'm pretty sure the Western or the everyone else in the world will back down. That's the thing.
Yeah,
it's like no one wants World War III, I don't think, and it's their nuclear arms, and they could, they're sufficiently powerful that you don't want war with them. You can't win.
So what is the significance of the South China Sea to China? Because it kind of seems like a strange spot. It's just directly south. You're still boxed in by Indonesia, Malaysia.
There's a few angles on it. I think there's a lot of political and pride and entitlement and all that sort of variables. But from a submarine perspective, there is some deep water in there as well. It's not all shallow, and it's where they base their, if you like, you could call them bastions, so similar to the Russian concept. Oh, yeah. It's their backyard where they can operate their nuclear missile submarines, and that's they do. That's where they base them, and that's where they're operating them. There's sufficiently few fishing vessels. So, I mean, in the East China Sea, and it's very shallow and it's full of fishing vessels, and it's not a good place for submarines. You said yourself about the Eric, about the not wanting to be between Taiwan and China. It's very shallow. It is all the way up the coast, and it's full of fishing vessels and dredging vessels and all sorts of things.
Right.
And when you see like 70 dredging vessels, with suction tubes going down to the seafloor, you don't want to be a submarine there.
No, definitely.
And this is peacetime. It's very hazardous. So the South China Sea is very important to them as their backyard for submarines, and they certainly don't want anyone else having it as someone else's backyard for submarines. I'd suspect that at the moment the leading powers could operate submarines there. US and Russia if it wanted to, and Britain if it wanted to. It'd be tricky because of distance, but it's like but they don't want that. It's there from a military. It's very significant, mainly as a place for their nuclear ballistic missile submarines.
Yeah, what you're looking at now is Fiery Cross Reef. It's actually got a full air base on it now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's complete. If you just look up Fiery Cross Reef on Google Maps, you'll find it.
And you can see actually where they dredged out an area here.
Yeah,
we don't have it on the thing.
Through this top area left right here. All this is all dredged.
In there.
Yep.
Yeah, what's really cool, if on my article that I did, sorry to reference an article, but I did an article on Forbes about the reality of Chinese submarines in the Indian Ocean. And there's actually a link to a tweet that's got a fantastic GIF on it of an island that they've built in the Indian Ocean for tourism. But they've done the same thing. What you're seeing on those reefs for military purposes, they've done it in the Indian Ocean as a tourist resort.
Oh, wow.
In the Maldives. And I put a link because it's just so beautiful. There's a guy, there's a Twitter account everyone should follow. They probably do. If they follow me, they're probably following this guy, D-Attis, ATIS.
Yeah.
He's a good guy. I've talked to him
actually got him pulled up right now. I've been going through his Twitter account a little bit as we go through the show.
Exactly, and he did one of an island they did in Indian Ocean. Now this is not it's not going to be a submarine base and stuff like that. But it's really impressive. Like he did practice. Like wow.
He's so good. I love his stuff.
Anything coming to China, yeah.
It's I happily use his tweets and things. He does amazing stuff. He's not alone, but he does amazing stuff. Definitely follow.
And he doesn't follow anybody else. Like he's just out there just grinding. I love it. Like he didn't even rely on anybody else. Most people will look at your stuff and then kind of go through and find some stuff based on your stuff, but.
I mean, I'm sure he's connected to a lot of good people, so I don't want to take away from all the other people out there. But yeah, he's definitely got his own angle on stuff and gets his own stuff, and I follow him and get stuff off him. Yeah.
Is on your? I think this is your infographic you made for Forbes, the number 3. That's the island they're making.
Yeah, the
south of India.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you want
in the Maldives? It's a tourist. I don't know who wants to have a go at saying that.
No, that's what we're asking you.
That's what I was building up to.
It's so I very simplistically label it as Chinese island. What it is an island that they've leased, and it's maybe a tourist island. I think the main use is tourism. I'm not suggesting otherwise, but clearly its location and the way that Chinese government demonstrably does mix commercial and military aims. Then it definitely it's definitely on the map, as it were, of submarine operations in the Indian Ocean. Yeah. I think it more as a post and things like that. But in any war scenario, it's definitely going to be a mark on the map.
It's crazy how they're doing that. I mean, literally taking island hopping to a whole new extreme, right?
Yeah, like
just building the islands and hopping to them.
It's like playing chess, but you get to build your own blocks outside the rest of the chessboard, and you get to do whatever you want from the outside. You know,
that's the point.
It's so crazy, man. But anyways, we're about to hit 2 hours, man. I really appreciate you for being on. You're obviously the best guest we've ever had. We've had you on so many times at this point. You always give us so much great, just original content. I think that when it comes to influencers and just people being online and trying to put out stuff on articles and even writing books at this point, it's just original content, right? What have you brought to the table that nobody else has? And I feel like you are at the top of that game, especially when it comes to the military side of open source intelligence. So I really appreciate everything you do, man, and I can't thank you enough for being on our show.
Oh, thank you for the kind words. I mean, I think there's a lot of other people. I'm just perhaps more louder about it.
Well, there you go. That's all you have to do.
You got to be the squeaky wheel, right? Somebody's got to get that oil, right? I mean, it's.
I mean, on seriously, I mean, I do it for a reason. I really think that more people should be interested in this stuff. I think it's interesting. So I'm doing my best to get, to raise awareness. That's why I do it.
That's my daily life right there. I feel like everybody should be interested in everything submarines. And if you, for the next 3 weeks, make sure you listen to our podcast because this is gonna be pretty crazy. We're gonna show you some other stuff too. And everybody should be listening to this stuff.
Me, so that's going to be cool.
Yeah. But anyways, you got anything else, Grego?
No, I think about wraps it up for this one.
Yeah, I think that was a good one. Thanks for being on, man. Is there anything you want to promote real quick before we cut off here?
No, other than check out my, I've now got all these different things. I've got the Forbes. I'm the guy who writes about submarines on Forbes. I've got my website is still a place to go for the more obscure stuff. So that's Covert Shores, hisutton.com. Naval News is one I write for occasionally. I think they're brilliant.
Yeah, that's right.
I mean, they're really the go-to place for news, like defense, expos and things like that. And really European particularly, so beyond America, because a lot of stuff is written about America, and then these guys have the whole world.
Yeah, and, Naval News is great. I love Xavier and all those guys over there. They're an amazing naval website for sure.
I do a little bit of stuff there. Just that's cool. And I write books. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell everyone that. But yeah, check out my books as well.
There you go. Let me pull it up real quick. Oh, give me 1 second. Pulling up your Amazon page.
The Forbes so is fun. I use an app on my phone called Flipboard.
Went to Forbes
for news, and I have a military category, and I'm always excited when I'm flipping through and I see Forbes come up, and I know it's something from you. Those are always good reads.
It is. They're getting more and more defense. I'm just a contributor, but they're clearly getting more and more defense people and some really good. David Hamblin and Dave Axe, for example.
Yeah, well, and I think that's it, man. Thanks for everybody joining us, especially DC in the chat room, man. You've been blowing up our chat. I really appreciate it. And anybody who wants to contribute to us, make sure you hit up our Patreon. I think it's patreon.com/techops. I could be wrong. You could be giving that to somebody else. I have no idea.
As long as someone gets it.
Yeah, just Google.
Google Tech Ops.
Yeah, you'll find it. Just Google Tech Ops. You'll find all the good stuff. But and make sure you go check out Covert Shore's webpage. Buy his books. They're amazing. I've bought all of them. So enjoy your weekend. Next weekend's July 4th. Next weekend,
4th,
yeah. So July 4th, and then July 5th we're gonna have on Larry Bond. Yeah, co-author of Red Storm Rising. It's gonna be a good one. We can't have on Tom Clancy, obviously. We would have him on too, but yeah. So we're gonna have Larry Bond on, talk about Harpoon. Greg's big old harpoon nerd.
Oh yeah, I probably have thousands of hours in that game over the years.
Oh man, so that's gonna be a good one. So make sure you guys check it out. Subscribe to the channel. Check us out on everything on Google that you can get on Tech Ops. So enjoy that and enjoy your day. Appreciate it. Bye.
Awesome. Cheers, guys. Bye.